Let's talk about the CNN YouTube debate. There was a comment that John McCain made about some of your strategies with a really dire assessment. I want to play this little clip of what he said. Listen to this.
Congressman Paul, I've heard him now in many debates talking about bringing our troops home and about the war in Iraq and how it's failed. And I want to tell you that kind of isolationism, sir, is what caused World War II. We allowed Hitler to come to power with that kind of attitude of isolationism and appeasement.
Okay. You were shaking your head as you heard the final words, but the comparison to Hitler and appeasement and isolationism, you had a chance to respond, but I want you to elaborate this morning.
Well, first off, Iraq is not Nazi Germany, and besides, I thought it was Hitler that caused World War II, not the American people who opposed going in. So it didn't make any sense, and then he was awfully confused about isolationism versus non-intervention. There's a big difference. Isolationism isn't what I advocate. I advocate non-intervention, not getting involved in the internal affairs of other nations and not pretending a country like Iraq is equivalent to Nazi Germany. Iraq had no army, no navy, and no weapons of mass destruction, had nothing to do with 9/11, so the comparison makes no sense.
Under what circumstances, if you were president, Congressman Paul, would you intervene outside the borders of the United States in some sort of crisis around the world?
When Congress directed me to in an act of war, if our national security was threatened and we went through the proper procedures, Congress would say our national security is involved, it's threatened, and we have to act, and Congress has that responsibility. The President is the Commander-in-Chief, and then he acts.
I guess the bigger point that John McCain was making, and he had just spent some time in Iraq during the Thanksgiving break meeting with U.S. forces there, was that the surge, he says, the military surge is working and that it would be a disaster if the U.S. were to pull out right now. I'll play a little clip of what he said after the debate.
Over in Iraq, the men and women who are serving know what's going on politically here. That they pay attention, and I tried to point out to Congressman Paul that they believe that they're winning, and they don't agree with his description of the motives for which we went to war in Iraq.
You want to respond to him, Congressman?
Well, yeah, we do disagree on this. I don't believe we went to the war for the right reason. I mean, there were no weapons of mass destruction. Had nothing to do with 9/11. So we were there for the wrong reason, and he doesn't understand the motivation for why they want to come here. It's not because we're wealthy and prosperous and free. They come here because we're in their country, and even if there is an improvement, which we all hope there is, we plan to keep 14 bases over there, a huge naval base, and we have this huge embassy. We have a permanent plan to stay there and take over these $30 trillion worth of oil in that region, and the people in those countries know that, and that's why they're very angry. And to deny that is folly. It just means that we have expanded the opportunity for the terrorists to come here because there's greater motivation. So I think we're in worse shape than ever before because there are more Al-Qaeda than ever before. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq before. Now they're all over the place, and their numbers are growing. So if we want to protect ourselves against terrorism, we have to understand what motivates them. Even Wolfowitz admitted this. He said that the base in Saudi Arabia was an instrumental part of what motivated Osama bin Laden. So if we ignore that, it's at our own folly.
I think a lot of voters out there will agree with you. The question, though, is this: will a lot of Republican voters agree with you? Because when you made that point at the debate the other night about what Wolfowitz had said about the Al-Qaeda operations and the U.S. bases that existed in Saudi Arabia before the war in Iraq, there were some boos that came out from that audience. So here's the question: are you in step, Congressman, right now with Republican voters whom you need to win in Iowa, New Hampshire, and beyond?
Well, a poll showed that half the Republicans in Iowa are opposed to the war and would like to come home. The real control in New Hampshire, where I am right now, is by the independents, the group of people that won the election for McCain a few years ago. So I would say that since 70% of the American people want out of the war and they're tired of it, Republicans better pick somebody who's opposed to war or have a new foreign policy, or they can't win. And I think the whole sentiment is shifting. The people are sick and tired of the war. We can't even afford it. We can't even fight the war without borrowing the money from the Chinese. So it doesn't add up. It really doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. The war is going to end because we're going to have such a political and financial havoc here with the devaluation of our dollar, because we just can't keep affording. This is usually how empires end, by spending too much money, maintaining their empires. We're in 130 countries. We have 700 bases around the world, and it's going to come to an end. I wanted to come to an end more gracefully and peacefully, follow the Constitution, and follow more sensible foreign policy.
You made a charge at the debate the other night in which you suggested that, in your words, millions of acres of eminent domain would be used to build a new international highway from Canada through the United States down to Mexico, suggesting that maybe there was a plan to create some sort of North American Union similar to the European Union, which is now being denied, obviously, by a lot of folks in Washington, including a spokesman for the Federal Highway Administration, saying on Thursday, saying there is no such superhighway like the one he's talking about. It doesn't exist in plans or anywhere else. On the basis of what are you making that suggestion that there's plans underway someplace to build this kind of super international highway?
Well, look up the website Security for Prosperity and Peace, which is a government project, and they talk about the highway. Texas passed unanimously in both House and Senate a resolution to put it on hold. We have a bill in the Congress to stop all the funding for this particular highway, and I think we have over 50 co-sponsors of it. To be in denial of this, that this is not planned, they're not going to admit it. It's subtle. They say we're just proving highways. But how come they had a meeting in April of 2005 with the President of Mexico, United States, and Canada, and they talk about these things? So to be in denial is one thing. I mean, they do believe in globalism, much more so than most Americans. I don't think there's any doubt about the plans. It's not going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but in time, this is likely to happen unless we have a shift in foreign policy.
I want to talk a little bit of politics in the brief time that we have left. The latest Des Moines Register poll in Iowa that's just out today, Congressman, has you at 7%, the same number as John McCain. Huckabee's at 29, ahead of Romney 24, Giuliani 13. As far as fundraising is concerned, though, and this is significant, in the last quarter that ended, you had raised $5 million, but there's some suggestion in this final quarter of 2007 you could raise more money than any of the other Republican presidential candidates, given the enormous amount you've raised online. Is that your assessment right now? Because there's some suggestion you've already raised in this quarter, what, $8-9 million?
No, that's not exactly right, because yesterday it went over 10.5 or 10.4 million. Our goal was to raise 12 by the end of the quarter. And there's going to be another super day sponsored by our supporters spontaneously, like they did on 11/5 when they raised 4.3, and they say this one's going to be bigger, and that's December 16th. So something big is going on. The people are really annoyed with conventional politics, and we're spending this money. We're spending it in Iowa. So I think those polls are going to continue to shift. Our numbers are going up, and people are just starting to think about how they're going to vote in these primaries. So who knows exactly what will happen, but we're pretty optimistic about the position we hold when we're going to be financed for February 5th as well.
Well, a quick point on that. So just to be precise, as of now, how much have you raised in this fourth and final quarter of 2007, and how much do you expect to raise by the time the quarter at the end of this year is already done with?
Well, I think it's 10.4. It's very close to that. I know it's over 10. Our goal was 12, and we have almost a month left, and we have a big day set. So we're going to be way over our goal of 12 million. And they can watch our website, and we run the tab minute by minute. Everybody knows exactly what we're doing. And I mean, at this rate, it could be, maybe 14 or 15 million dollars. It just is astounding. It astounds us, but it really tells tells me that although I had a great deal of concerns about the country, the American people were equally concerned, and they're willing to put their money with a candidate who's willing to state these positions, all these concerns, whether it's the foreign policy and coming home or the irresponsible spending here, the terrible policy we have with monetary policy, the protection of our dollar, and the income tax system that is so unliked. And I want to not just revamp it, I want to get rid of it and not replace it with anything. People are ready for some changes.